Hey, everybody, welcome to another thrilling episode. And this one is a thrilling episode. We'll get to why in a minute. Of Smoke and Mirrors. Today's episode is brought to you by Things. Things are stuff. Really should have written a joke for that. Sorry. Now here's a song. The highway to the danger zone. The highway to the danger zone. And now here they are, your invenerable hosts, Godlos, Kareem, Wyndham. Oh, right. I got to do the cameras too. I forgot. I knew that. Hey, what's going on, Precious? We are early. And all of my friends who do not pay attention and or have been smoking during Smoke and Mirrors weren't paying enough attention. We've been mentioning that we would be early for about a week, and the reasons are going to become clear in a moment. And we're double early because we're not doing 2:20, we're doing 2:10. So that's kind of like 4:20 someplace. So if you're here for it, do what you do. We're going to keep smoking limited today. But this will be your chance to join me, or for me to join you. You smoke all you want. This is all I'm going to smoke today. All right. Well, that's how you know you are here, and I am here. Let's talk about what else is going to be happening this week before we get into the good stuff. You will see right there that on Wednesday, the 29th, I am going to be here speaking with Asatu Hall. Asatu Hall is a midwife in Oakland, California, who is working on issues of birth and birth rights in black communities. And we'll talk more about specifically what that means with her at that time. And I see, looking up, that it seems like I've got a wrong card up next, so I'm going to press it and see what happens. Yep, this says Crystal's here, which is true. But for some reason, that card keeps switching back and forth. What I wanted to let you know is that Kariga Bailey, whose photo I don't have up there right now, is going to be here with us tomorrow. If you are in our community page, do me a favor. Have a look at that. You know, sometimes the technology doesn't go that well, but you may notice there is a new bug on the screen that is compliments of the designers over at Treat You Nice Signs. My man Treat You Nice letting it be known that this is not only Smoke and Mirrors, but signed to, I guess, remind me what my own name is, because I might otherwise forget. Today, I am going to set this to the side to make sure that there is no confusion, because some of us are not in places like Portland, Oregon, where it is perfectly legal to indulge in marijuanas. It is completely illegal to express your freedom of speech or your free rights. So, there's a give and take. There's a give and take to all of it. But today I do have a very special guest with me. This is somebody who I've been hoping to bring to you for some time, really since we started this. And is someone who I've had the privilege of not knowing, because we really haven't known each other in some time, but someone who I've been able to see, somebody whose actions I've been watching over the past at least 15 years. And they've been deeply involved in struggles that have meant something very deep to my heart. And so right now, I would like to welcome Under the Philosopher's Tree with me, myself, and I, my friend, CEO of IllumiNatives. This would be Crystal Echohawk. Crystal, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
How's this for a horrible time machine, huh?
I keep having flashbacks to Majestic Heights,
Right.
elementary elementary school, and I think you wearing the Michael Jackson red Thriller jacket. Lots
The
of good memories.
the Beat It jacket, in fact, yes,
Yeah,
that was the one. Yeah,
yeah.
that was quite a lot. How long were you in Majestic Heights? How long were we in elementary school together?
Third through sixth grade.
Third. Oh wow, you were there third through sixth, so you were there before me.
When
Because
did you come? Fourth grade,
I
fifth
got there
grade.
fourth grade. I got there for Mrs. Glass,
Oh yeah.
who was interesting. I've talked to other kids who remember her as being somebody that they weren't that upset when she crossed over because of her treatment to them. I didn't remember it that way. Was that? Did you have Mrs. Glass, or was
Yeah,
that the
I
year
had
they
Mrs.
split
Glass.
everybody up?
No, I think I had Mrs. Glass. I don't remember a ton about her. I think what I do remember is that we were probably one of maybe no more than 7 to 10 kids of color in our entire elementary school.
For sure.
Very white Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, for sure. It was
Yeah,
you, me, Chris McIntyre, my sister, Amber Tate, Jason McIntyre,
yeah. Then there were Antoinette,
Andrea, and
Andrea,
Antoinette.
and I think there might have been one or I don't know. I might have been the only Native kid. I can't remember.
I think you were
So
the only
yeah,
full blood native. I think you were the only registered native kid, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I know Antoinette is from Juarez. I think from Juarez, and she knows her ancestry. I know mine, but I know I'm not registered. But I think you're the only registered
Yeah,
native in the entire school.
yeah. So we were, we were, we were just a little crew.
Wow.
For
So how did
Friday.
you end up? How did you end up in Boulder at that time? And this is the we're talking about the early 1980s. How did you end up in Boulder then?
Yeah, my dad was a Native attorney, and he was working for the Justice Department and their kind of division at the time of the Justice Department that was really focused on Native land and water rights issues. And he
Okay,
got transferred to Denver, which was great because actually a huge part of our family lived in Boulder and started the Native American Rights Fund. So it was just like, perfect coming home for our family. And then, he ended up going into law practice there in Boulder. So
that
yeah,
is a
that's
trip
when
because I ended up spending a lot of time at the Native American Fund when I was at the university. Like a
yeah.
lot of time. Yeah,
Crazy. Oh
yeah,
my
that is
gosh, I
wild.
love it. Small world. I know.
That
Yeah,
is
for
wild.
real.
So, how common the name is Echo Hawk? Let me ask you that too, because I was on a show with an artist in Ottawa whose last name is Echo Hawk, and I don't remember his first name. But when I heard that, I was wondering, is that as common as
No, I bet it was Bunky Echo Hawk that you were on.
it may have been? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's a really well-known artist.
okay, wow.
No, in fact, we are the only family, to my knowledge, in all of Indian country with that last name.
Okay,
Uh,
all right. I figured.
yeah. So I think we did a recent sort of search, and there's something like 112 Echo Hawks that exist. So
So yes, I was definitely on with one of your cousins the other night. That's wild.
that's crazy. I bet it was Bunky. Oh,
Yeah,
small
that
world.
is wild. That is
Yeah.
wild. Oh man. Okay, so what have you been up to since sixth grade? It's been a minute.
Right. The good, the bad, the ugly. Where do I start?
Right.
Um, I just think it's such an interesting journey. When I think back, growing up in Boulder, and it was hard to be Native in Boulder. It was hard to be a person of color in Boulder, right?
Mm,
And I think so much of when I think going back, like I come from such a strong family who's all Native activists and lawyers and activists in some kind of way for Native peoples. I think growing up in Boulder, it was so hard to be who we were, right? For all of us.
yeah.
And I think like it took me leaving Boulder to really start to explore my own identity as a Pawnee woman and as someone that's mixed, or, my mom is white. And like, what does that mean? And it took me leaving Boulder really to begin to kind of go on that deep journey that really just transformed my political consciousness, right? And I ended up going abroad and studying overseas in England, and just got sort of radicalized,
Mm.
right, in terms of my politics and just really learning just about so many different other cultures. And I think just really coming back around to being proud of who I am. So I think that was really important getting out of Boulder for me to kind of start to set me on my journey for the work I do today.
So when you said you got radicalized at university, no, is
Yeah,
that college or university? What did they say?
university in England, which is
Okay.
like what?
All right. So
Yeah.
when you got radicalized there, what was going on? How did you get radicalized? Who hit you up?
Well, I think it was just it was really being exposed to so many different people from all over the world and so many different, you know, people of color from different backgrounds and just different socioeconomic circumstances. It was just like such a diversity that I think, by the time we all got up into high school and other things in Boulder, it was just, really hard. But I think the biggest thing was actually I studied under, I know you're laughing, right? But the university I studied at is actually renowned for its research and scholarship on the fall of the Berlin Wall and the role of civil society in organizing, right, in
Okay.
political organizing, social movements. And it was really learning about the power of social movements and organizing over there. But I ended up, I think it was my year I graduated with my bachelor's is when the Zapatistas declared revolution in Mexico in 1994. And that really began to be the focus of my studies, was
Okay.
really looking at this indigenous-led movement. And because at the time, right, it really caught the world by surprise that this little ragtag Mayan army had suddenly sort of captured the world's attention around NAFTA and all these other sort of issues around neoliberalism and other things. And I ended up doing my master's thesis on it. And from there, I actually went straight to Chiapas and got recruited to really work with the Zapatistas.
Shit. Come on.
It was really cool, and yeah, so I ended up working for the Zapatistas for 3 years and really looked at how I was, doing that work around the frame of indigenous rights and international indigenous rights and
Yeah.
self-determination. And it was an incredible journey. And I really did a lot of cultural organizing, right? So working with a lot of artists and community groups to really, how do we do storytelling? How do we use art and culture change around our political organizing? And it's so funny when I fast forward to what I'm doing today with IllumiNative, I learned so much from that experience.
So what is it that you're doing today with IllumiNative? What does that look like in this moment?
In this moment, it's really about transforming the way people think about and engage with Native peoples. And what we learned from this big research project that I co-led a couple of years ago called the Reclaiming Native Truth Project. It was like a $3.3 million research project, and we really went out and started to map what is the dominant narratives about Native peoples. What are the dominant perceptions that diverse sets of Americans hold about us? Why do they think that about us? Where does that come from? And how does it impact us in different spheres, whether it's the courts, Congress, everyday life? And we found that one of the biggest threats we face is that we're invisible to today's society. And a lot of people aren't even sure if we still exist. And if we do, we're sort of these caricatures, right? We get reduced to things like Native mascots or a headdress, or, a logo on butter, or, whatever.
A tattoo on Johnny Depp.
A tattoo on Johnny Depp, exactly. And so it's really about how do we change the narrative about Native peoples in this country, and how do we amplify who we are in the 21st century, and that we're telling our stories, right? And why representation matters. And so that's a big focus of what we do. We focus on changing the narrative in pop culture, media, and education are our three sort of spaces we work in. And we do a lot of, work with artists and others to really look at how we use culture to really shift and change the way people think about us and engage with us.
All right. So I mean, that is exciting, right? So who for you then are there musical artists, visual artists? Who do people need to be paying attention to get their head out of their ass and not be stuck in these fucking Tanto Kimosabe bullshit images that right? Because the thing is that I think too many people forget is that history isn't forgotten, right? History is
Yeah.
buried. And one of the ways that I think to your point, that it continues to be buried is that people talk about the genocide of Native Americans, and it's like, motherfucker, we here. Like, what are you talking about right now? Genocide of. People ask me where I'm from. My mom is from New Mexico. My grandfather's from Oaxaca. My grandmother is Flathead Hopi and Scottish because of rapists. And so when people ask me where I'm from, I'm like, here. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what that question even means, really. And
Yeah.
so who are the artists, the contemporary culture makers that are moving the conversation forward, right? Who maybe are not in any kind of discussion about the abusing their power to seduce women writers. Sherman and
He who
Lexi.
shall not be named. Oh.
Oh, I said it.
I mean, there's so many. Like, it just depends on like what genre, and so like for example, not nepotism, but Bunky Echohawk, who's just an amazing visual artist, and I'm so proud of him because, gosh, I mean, for so many years prior to this, he's really been on the cutting edge of flipping pop culture on its head, right, and really challenging these stereotypes and these representations and our invisibility. So his visual artwork, I mean, he's a prolific painter, but he also does spoken word. He's really even done things like partner, with Nike to help, develop early on like a line of Nike apparel that really celebrates contemporary Native peoples in our art, in just new and different ways. So he's definitely an artist to follow.
Okay.
I also think about Bethany Yellowtail, who I'm representing today with her clothing. She is Crow and in Northern Cheyenne, and she's amazing what she is doing with fashion, right, in terms of changing the narrative and really just around contemporary Native fashion that's really, that's so connected to community and expression. And it's just been incredible to see like how successful she's been in doing that, but really keeping to her own roots and community. Or, there's filmmakers like Sterling Harjo, who has a new film coming, or a new show coming out on FX that he's doing in partnership with called Reservation Dogs, which is huge because it'd be one of the first like Native, written, directed, shows on FX, that's really going to be about telling the stories of these like, young Native boys.
Yeah, can you give us anything up about the script, but not really? Is it still?
No, I mean,
Okay, all right, that's fair. NDA,
right now,
NDA.
Yeah, and I would say, too, like Stephen Paul Judd, check him out on Instagram. I mean, he is a mad scientist who is just constantly taking old, pictures and different things and flipping them on their head around really telling the stories of contemporary Native peoples and experiences, and just he does it in crazy cool ways. I mean, there's just such an abundance of Native artists and writers. Tommy Orange, who really writes, his last book, There was really about the experiences of contemporary urban Native peoples and that, diaspora, right? That Native peoples have faced, being kind of moved into the cities over time. So there's just like no shortage of just a killer, amazing contemporary Native artists working across every genre right now. It's really an exciting time. Yeah.
That's amazing. So tell me about, is the mythology between Herb and res folks, like, is that like real shit, or is that some like hyped up black on black crime bullshit? You know what I'm saying? Like, because it's put out to white folks and it's put out to readers all the time of a voyeuristic view, right? That somehow there's this like very clear delineation between urban natives and natives who grew up on reservations or whatever. And a lot of that too was posited and put forward by he who shall be unnamed. And so in your life experience, does it resonate that same way, or does it not really hit like that?
I think it's just like so many other things when we talk about our communities, they're not monolithic. And so there's no like clear binary there, right? And it's really fluid. I mean, I think you have a set of like urban natives, right, that maybe have never been home. And for whatever reasons, there's been some level of disruption in terms of that connectivity back to where they come from,
Yeah.
right? And that happens with so many different families over time, right? Where those connections begin to be severed. And so you don't, I mean, I think those are some of the most beautiful and eloquent and painful parts when I was reading Tommy Orange's book that I think he spoke to so well is like, you've got a generation of Native young people growing up that feel this disconnection, right? Because they don't maybe have family that they're close to back home. Like, how do they access their culture and their language and to learn about who they are, right? But I think that there's also a whole nother fluid dynamic where it's just very fluid of how people are moving back and forth between city and res, right? And how people go home for ceremony or to visit or just are kind of in and out with that. So I think it's far more fluid
Yeah.
than anything else. I think, but there are things there. And I think it's part of where when you talk to people out in that are non-native, right? Their image, if they're going to see anything, is somebody living on a reservation, and they're going to have a
Right.
certain sort of view of what that looks like. And I think that's where the pain, sometimes the invisibility that urban natives feel is like, wait a minute, we're so much bigger than that. We're so much more complex and diverse in how we live and how we move. That oftentimes that urban experience does get erased. So that's why it's really important to kind of, really give voice to all of that range of
Yeah.
experiences, fluidity.
Yeah. So the other question that came up for me when you were talking about bringing forward the artists, and I think this is a question that again, right, crosses over any creator, any artist who is not white, who is gaining more mainstream credibility and acceptedness, and then it becomes a question of like, is there a danger then in the access and the co-optation? Because if the popularity gets to a point, for instance, of like, the those horrible like tattooed skull T-shirts and all of that shit, right? Of any one of the designers that you mentioned, for instance, right? That means there's no way for any of us to become mainstream in the United States or find mainstream success without white kids buying our shit, right? And so I look at what happened to African American expressions of music, to somebody like Linda Ronstadt, who's right like Latina, but you wouldn't know that, and the mainstreaming of artists who find themselves looking for more space. Is there a danger that exists with that, or is that just part of what it is to be in the United States? If there's going to be any sort of commerce involved with it at all, I guess.
I think there is a danger, right? I remember when we were in the middle of our research project, right, we found, our finding around invisibility, right? So which
Mm-hmm.
means therefore we've got to be fighting for our visibility. We've got to be pushing for that. And I remember very distinctly having a conversation with our team, and it's like, be careful what we wish for, right? Because with that increased visibility around all aspects of who we are, including our various cultures, we already struggle enough with cultural appropriation. Like, how do we fight that? And I think, it's really interesting. And I've watched a lot of different Native artists, particularly, I just give the example of like the fashion folks, right? And they, like I think about Bethany, she actually has like sort of an FAQ that pops up, like, are non-natives allowed to wear what I design? And it's like, absolutely, as long as you do it with respect, right? As long as you do it here with respect, and that you are purchasing this from Native artists who are creating this, and that we're saying we're going to share this with you. And I think, it's really the power of these artists to kind of set those boundaries around their art. And I think it's our job to continue to have their backs and reinforce that, the industry doesn't have to make them turn cartwheels, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
suddenly they feel like they're having to cross some lines that they feel very uncomfortable with. And I think we're in a powerful moment as people of color, right? To really look at, wait a minute, we're not putting up with this shit anymore, right?
Right.
We're
Right.
put boundaries around things, and let's have some conversation what it means to be an ally, right? and what those boundaries are. And there's going to be sometimes where we're going to say, no, you can't. And I think it's just us, all of us, even more so coming into power in our voices and our organizing and our boundaries with people, that you don't get to just take everything that you want. But it's also us having good boundaries with ourselves, right? About being really careful.
So in that circumstance, say, whose job is it to be checking them white girls at Coachella? Who got to be the one putting a smash on them for showing up in headdresses, thinking they cute?
I think we all have to do it, right?
We see you. We see you.
And you don't look cute.
And you ain't cute.
It's got to get to the point that where we get everyone to understand, right? And it's that reciprocity, right? That as it's not just, it's about all of us. How are we looking out for each other, and how are we sort of training each other to stand up for one another and show up for one another, right? And I don't see that as Native people, we're getting out of that anytime soon, for calling people out, saying, and educate. Part of it's going to be educating. And what I don't like is when people shut it down, saying it's not my responsibility, you should just figure it out and know better.
Right.
Because they're not going to go educate themselves. So I do think, that's part and parcel of it too.
All right. Okay. So let's get to the hard shit then, right? Because we know the moment we're in, right? Globally, and we know that historically, for the purpose of colonialism to work effectively, there had to be a massive infusion of anti-blackness into Native culture, right? Including the fact that we recognize the what is it? The 7 civilized nations, right?
5 civilized tribes.
7 civilized tribes are also those who were engaged on some level in the practice of African slave trade, right? And that's part of why, from Europeans, they were given the recognition of being so-called civilized, right? So how and what does our shared history mean in terms of this moment in Black Lives Matter, when Trump is unleashing the black ops, quite literally, Betsy DeVos's baby brother's Blackwater ops, who've been overseas dealing with Zapatistas, fucking with people's sovereignty across the globe, right? Now being sent into cities on what has been native land that's been stolen, right? In this moment of Black Lives Matter, what is the responsibility within our cultures to meet each other, and what does that look like in your estimation?
It's so needed. And I think it's like, we have to really unpack all of these things. We have to unpack the anti-blackness and the history, right, that exists within some, not all, Native communities. And I think that's what I always caution people is we need to be real careful, no matter what we're talking about, that we don't paint everything with one stroke, right? And I think that there's really specific histories and other things, but it has to be unpacked. It has to be reconciled. I just think it's a long overdue conversation between Black and Native communities, right? And I think it's very much around place, right? I think because it is so different from place to place, right? Like, I'm talking today from Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? I'm in the heart of the 5 civilized territories, right? And understanding that. And I think that's the conversation that we have to unpack about what colonialism did to all of us. And it was at its core advantage to turn us against one another, right? And to really look at that. And I think what we need to really do is find ways that we can be very intentional about how do we really see each other and hear each other, right? Because I know on the flip side, when we did focus groups with Black communities, right? They held some really toxic notions about Native Americans.
Fuck yes. Fuck yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of toxicity and misconceptions on both sides.
Right.
And we got to unpack that. shit. And it's gonna take a minute, I think, to really look at that. But I think it's so important in this moment that it's like we need to remember that this country is built on stolen land and stolen bodies, right? That's what this is. But we are not only as Black and Native peoples joined by the trauma, right, that we've been put through under, colonization and all of this. We also need to look at each other that we share resiliency,
Yeah.
right, in our communities, and to really look into that resiliency and joy and sort of these frames to kind of find ways that we can start to unpack and have some of these conversations and really build, because we're going to be stronger together. And I think that there are a lot of divisions there that we need to find space to work through. And I think as much as what's happening in this moment since the murder of George Floyd is creating that space to do it, I think we have to be very intentional, but it's like the time is now. And I think it's such a powerful time. And, I think, like, I'm so curious, and I know for so many Native peoples, it's like, how do we move forward in this space that this is about the movement for Black lives first and foremost, and amazing things that are happening around mascots or other things are happening only because of this moment of reckoning in this space that was created by the movement of Black lives. And I think I think a lot of people are like, how do we move forward respectfully? How do we build bridges? And how do we not inadvertently co-opt a moment? And I kind of want to frame this because I'm dying you to ask, but I'm like watching all this shit like blow up in Portland. And I'm like, and I'm hearing all these people supposedly like yelling movement for, it's Black Lives Matter. But then I'm like, is this really about Black Lives Matter, or is this becoming something else that's getting co-opted in this moment? And I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
I think it's growing in this moment, honestly, right? From what I've seen, from what I've been watching, because I think that what's been happening is that for a very long time, many of us who've been in the streets, who've been in these protests, who've been in this fight, have been calling for our melanin challenged siblings and nibblings to show up, right? And to show up with their eyes open, so they're not just showing up doing what the fuck ever and misnaming and misframing movements and opportunities, right? So the Occupy movement, which fuck you for that name, right? The whole thing around the Women's March, I've talked about it many times, and the completely Eurocentric framing of these pink hats, and like the fact that these white women showed up never again until just now, right? Many of them. And in the last several months, I think it is a combination of being trapped in the moment of COVID, right? Of the fact that none of us is free of having to examine our own demons. That these people who brought the devil to the party, right? Because they know we could see spirits, but they're the ones who brought the devil. We didn't bring him. So that they're having to really deal with the fact that they did that, and they are really standing at the front line. I think that the same thing that ends up happening, though, is that the federal agents and their whiteness then attacks them with a level of viciousness, because they're race traders now. They're breaking the social script and the social covenant of whiteness, right? And so now the feds are bucking at them too. And here, if you have the opportunity to actually know the organizers on the ground, the folks who are doing the work, there's no one. There are people, of course, because white people, they just, somebody gonna do whatever the fuck they feel like doing. But for instance, mom's on the front line, dad's on the front line, the Marines who've been out there, those folks are working part and parcel with Black folks who are the organizers, who are really leading this thing. And they're very intentionally and very purposefully at the front line, right? They're the pawns. They are the protection. So it's not a matter of them having stepped up and us waiting for, like, well, who the fuck asked these people to be here? Like, they were asked to be here and they're doing it. And so for me, in the same way, like going back historically, right? if we go further than that falsified European history of the civilized nations, right, of the civilized tribes, and go back further to the coalitions between the Seminole, to the native folks in New Orleans, and all the way back to 1621 and 1627 in Bacon's Rebellion, and black folks, natives, and Irish working together to burn down every goddamn plantation they could find. This feels much more akin to that moment to me. But I'd also, who the fuck knows? We'll find out when the ashes are, it's history. We'll see.
I love hearing that, though, that those groups are really working in partnership, right? I mean, that's a model for how allies like showing up, right? And really doing that in a good way and putting themselves online. I mean, it's just, it blew my mind watching the news this morning. And just all of a sudden it was like somebody shooting on the front lines up there in Portland. And then all of a sudden one of those federal troops comes around the corner and full camo assault rifle, like, holy shit, this is happening in this moment in this country. I'm excited. I just don't think that there's any way to go back to what it was before. I think that there's, this is also imperfect in its moments, but I think for Black and Native people, but I think for white people, I think for Latinx, like across the board, I think this is such an opportunity for us all to really see each other and unite and organize. And I'm more hopeful than I've ever been.
Yeah.
This is really starting to feel like not just, there were moments during the protests, right, where I was just like, oh shit, this is becoming the, like, what we called it, the Standing Rock moment, right, where you're getting yourself, and you're like, and I was like, oh, but this really feels like this is something bigger than that now, know?
Well, and it's in every city, right? So it's not that we're even in the situation of Standing Rock or Ferguson, of calling activists and organizers from other areas, hey, come here, because everybody's busy in their city. Everybody, like in Brixton, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Mexico, everybody is busy getting it. It's a thing. It's very different than it's ever been. I don't think there's any going back. I
don't see how we can, and it's going to be so disappointing if we do. Yeah, I don't know. I think I keep thinking it can't get any crazier than it has been. And then, then now we're starting to inch closer and closer to the election.
Right.
Right. And everything else. But if we like fuck this up, and don't figure out ways to come together, then shame on us. I mean, the table is set.
Yeah, well, and for Gen X especially, I think we have been I think we were one of the last generations with hope to believe that in our youth we were the ones who were going to change this world, right? Like, I remember what it felt like, as goofy as it sounds, to be at the first Lollapalooza and see white kids and black kids and brown kids all at a concert at like its piece. Like, that shit was like, yo, we're changing the world with Dinosaur Jr. Y'all not ready for Tribe Called Quest, right? Like, it felt like a thing. But it was very superficial, right? It was very superficial. And yelling at white kids with dreadlocks and fighting for programs of study. And these folks and these generations leading this really are looking for structural, systematic, institutional changes that, I couldn't have believed would happen in our lifetime, even in a serious discussion, that we're even talking about abolishing the police on a regular basis.
Right?
What?
What?
So,
yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, it's just, these are extraordinary times. I mean, to your point. And, I think I don't know. I'm curious on your thoughts, because I kind of constantly wake up and think about how do we really, with great intentionality, build this multiracial movement for justice, right? Where we really see each other, And I think that that's hard sometimes, particularly as when we talk about Black, Indigenous, in different communities of color,
Mm-hmm.
we often kind of get into the oppression Olympics thing,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
we leave one another out,
Yeah.
right? And I think oftentimes because our research shows, I mean, 80% of Americans know little to nothing about us, and that includes Black, Latinx, Asian, like a lot of people just don't know anything about us. And so
Right.
oftentimes we sort of get left out of this conversation. So I think like, how do we really build something that lasts? Because when I think about, I'm so tired of, and I say it constantly about the disproportionate impacts of COVID on communities of color. Like, how do we need to come together to transform that? Like, how do we really come together and build power, right,
Yeah.
for a world we really want to be in? And it's something I wake up thinking about like every day.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
That's me
That's
too.
not
I mean,
exactly an easy question, right?
right.
But
I
I think
mean, I
we
think
got to
it's
keep it going.
yeah. I think it's the same thing, right? It's the perpetuity of asking ourselves that very question, right?
Yeah.
And making that the practice. Because if there's not a mindfulness around it, if we're not actively keeping that at the forefront of our heads, then we're going to lose that as a focus. It gets very easy to fall back into ideas of nationalism, ideas of a binary, ideas of the patriarchy, ideas of winning, right? All of these based and rooted in capitalism, which is rooted in colonialism, built on colonialism, rooted in slavery, right? And all of it absolutely dependent on misogyny and a false binary around gender that just does not exist in indigenous cultures anywhere, right? There's no brown indigenous culture where it's like, well, this is what boys are and this is what girls are. And this, I mean, it's just like, what the fuck is, you know, so to get to a place of that reclamation does take, I think, a process of a very slow and arduous decolonization and radicalization, much like what you talked about for yourself, right? I think too, remembering that for the young activists, for the young organizers, where we see them making mistakes, I think for us it's essentially we remember not to do what our elders did, right? And one, shame them for anything that they may be missing in terms of a strategic point, right? Because the impatience of youth is what's necessary to make change, and they're making that change, right? And the other is to always remember that we need mentors who are 25 and younger, because we don't know what the fuck to do. If we did, we would have done it.
So
So,
true.
you know, so for us to not disregard what they're telling us as well, because they are, I mean, they're gonna, if there's going to be a future, they're the ones who are going to be able to hold it, and they need to lead at least the shape of it.
Yeah.
And I think that they have a greater pliability of thought, political thought, cultural thought, gender thought than we were raised having. Certainly in the '80s in Boulder. That
That's an understatement.
right,
Line.
right. So I know you got to get going by 3, but I do not want to get out of here before we talk for a second, at least, about change the name, the victory. Talk to me. Where are we? How do we
Okay.
feel?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so what's so important for people that don't know is that this fight to change the Washington football team name, which is a dictionary defined racial slur, the R
The
word and the N
Washington
word.
football name. I hate
Yeah.
that what they've done. So the Washington racial slurs. Please continue.
Yes. So, I mean, really, this is a decades long fight. And it was, again, I mean, you talk about Native activists like Suzanne Harjo, Amanda Blackburn. I mean, like thousands of Native people over decades have been organizing this, not only against the football team, but on their own communities that are dealing with Native sports mascots. I mean, so really it was just, again, this space, right, that was created from the movement Black Lives that reignited this conversation, right? As once we started seeing Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben's and all these other kind of racialized brands start to go, it sort of created this space to reignite this conversation. And really, Illuminated was excited to have a part along lots of other people working shoulder to shoulder to really lean in and put some pretty serious pressure on the team. So now they have officially retired the R word. And now they're officially the Washington football team, at least it sounds like, for the season. And, we're just still kind of waiting with, there's not a lot of trust there, obviously, that they not include any more native imagery in anything else that they do. So I think that's where everybody's still holding their breath, right? Like, we want to see what the final name is, the logo, right? But I think everybody is cautiously optimistic that it's finally all going to be retired. But really, the NFL we still have the Chiefs, which is incredibly problematic, both in terms of the name, the imagery, but it's the fan behavior. And I think that's important for people to understand, is that you might look at that or the Braves and think like, yeah, I mean, that's not a slur. Like, we get so many people like, why are Native people so upset? Well, it's because the fans go out and they paint their faces red. They don fake headdresses, right? They do all of this really offensive
They
sort
put
of
native heads on a pike. They put native heads on a pike when it's the opposing team.
Exactly. And it's really like, there was a study done right after the Super Bowl, because the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl and won it, that there was something like 78,000 tweets that could be categorized as hate speech by the rival 49er fans against the Chiefs, that were all related to Native people's hate speech. So that's a really valid point. It's like, this is just what it perpetuates. So it's not, you might look at that and think the Braves is not a big deal, but then when you look at all that associated fan behavior of home team fans and rival fans, that's what perpetuates racism. And so there's been a lot of science, and research done that really shows that it is harmful to Native children. It psychologically harms them. And it also shows that it actually fuels bias amongst non-Native peoples. And the only people it increases self-esteem of is white people. So, we're still really organizing. We want to see the Cleveland Indians change their name. We want to see the Chiefs go. I think the NFL owes a reconciliation process with Native peoples after what they've put us.
Let's go.
I think there has to be a complete elimination of all Native mascots. So, that's what we're still fighting for.
Absolutely. And while we're at it, let's not act like the 49ers is nothing sweet. That name is some bullshit, too. Fuck y'all.
Exactly.
And the Vikings with your goddamn skinhead ass name. We see you. I told you I wouldn't smoke on screen. I did it.
You did.
See? I kept my promises. So listen, thank you so much for spending some time. I do want to respect your time. I know we had to work diligently because you are involved with so many different movements, so many different aspects, so many different artists that we wanted to make sure we honored the white man's time because the white man be shackling us all to that bullshit and having us have to get different tasks done. Is there anything else that you need people to know where they should be reaching out, where they can connect with movements? What should they be doing right now? Who should they be writing to keep this name change permanent and to keep it going and to keep all those other name changes you were talking about?
Well, definitely follow IllumiNatives on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We're dropping some new stuff on the mascots starting today, later this week. We need people to join that campaign and help us just keep turning on the pressure on these teams. And really, whatever they can do in their local communities, if there's Native mascots, start petitions, take it to the school board. The time is now is our hashtag, and the time is now to eliminate all Native mascots. And I think the final note I would leave on, my friend, is I just wanted to say, I see you and I watch you. I love following you. It's beautiful, the work that you do and your voice and the show and just the spaces that you create and the conversations. And I just want to say, I am so proud of you. And we have come a long way since Majestic Heights.
Yo, Mrs. Hewitt can't stop this shit. Yo. Thank you so much for being here, Crystal. I sincerely appreciate it. Folks, give it up for Crystal Echo Hawk spending a little bit of time underneath the Philosopher's Tree today. Let's get that applause button one time. Hey, yo. So this has been Smoke and Mirrors. You know what it is. Nothing but geniuses. All my friends are geniuses. I keep telling people this, and they think I'm being hyperbolic. They think I'm bullshitting. And then what you need to know is that, by and large, so far everyone you've seen is one of my actual real life friends, people I really know. Before we go, one confession. I got it. Where are you? There you are. Okay, so here's a confession that I have to make. I was in one of the programs, one of the last programs at the University of Colorado that gave credibility and platform to one Mr. Ward Churchill. And I defended that up until the early 2000s. Glenn was right. Ward is wrong. I'm sorry. What else needs to be said about that? Anything?
That you did it.
I'm so sorry. So bad. So bad. Okay. Thank you so much. Hey, this has been Smoke and Mirrors. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Listen, if you believe in the work of Black, brown, and queer artists, all of whom support the idea of changing the names of all of these racist ass teams, I don't want to say any of the names. You fucking know what they are. Please consider working with the artists who are part of the Marsha P. Johnson Foundation. Out on the West Coast, you can donate at marshap.org/donate. We have been asking folks to donate there all this month. Next month, we're going to be looking at asking for folks to donate at where are we going to be donating next month? Probably many of the bail funds for the folks who are in the streets now. Hey, if you dig this, if you think that this is a thing that you'd like to support, if you feel that it's as good as Crystal thinks it does, then think about becoming a patron. You can be an S&M patron. Yeah, okay, I heard it too. Fine. Anyway, that's at Patreon at Smoke and Mirrors. CCB. You can be a patron like Kristen and Renee and Michael and Natalie and Juliet and Tarika and Tracy. And that's all the names that go by there. Speaking of our good friend Kristen, who is also a patron, and those moms on the front line who have been asked to be there, one of them had their third eye bust wide open just 2 nights ago. That's my good friend Kristen. Look at that. Her third eye is wide ass open. That is courtesy of one of the bullets of one of these soldiers who thought it would be prudent to shoot her in the face. Let that only give you more resolve going forward. Foot to the gas. We can't stop this. Hey, this has been Smoke and Mirrors. You can find me at IG at El Caballo Negrito. You can find me at Twitter at Caballo Negrito. If you'd like to share this project and be a part of that, please do know that I will not bogart. Simply share it under the tree. We call that passing the J. If you want to drop 5 on it, you can do that at Venmo at Carlos-Wyndham. You can do that at Cash App at $CK Wyndham. You can do that at PayPal /me at CK Wyndham. You have a guest you think should be here? Do you have a thing you think we should talk about? I don't know what that sound was, but there it is. You can find me at Smoke and Mirrors, CCB. Please do reach out at gmail.com. Wash your hands. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. And if you have to go outside, please do wear a mask. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. Love you. We'll talk to you tomorrow when we will be here with Kariga Bailey. Bye. Change the fucking name. Bye.